Behind me is the new 911 Dakar, and it's essentially a jacked up off-road version of the world's most famous sports car. And in this video, I'm going to launch it, slide it, and if the kind folks at Porsche let me, jump it to see if it can live up to its Dakar nameplate. But before we begin, if you want a great deal on a new car, make sure to head over to whatcar.com. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. When you think of Porsche off-roaders, your mind probably jumps straight to the brand's formidable Cayenne SUV, and perhaps even the smaller, albeit less off-road capable Macan. But you might be surprised to learn that it's the brand's 911 sports car that has the richer off-road pedigree. Flick through the history books and you'll note that legendary racing driver Quick Vic Elford won the world's first ever rallycross race back in 1967 at the wheel of a borrowed 911. There was also a time when Porsche dominated the Paris-Dakar rally, first conquering it in 1984 with a 911, and then in 1986 with the 911-based 959 supercar. Since then, tuning specialists Tuthill, Roof and the Keen Project have produced countless road-going 911 Safari resto mods, but it's taken until now for Porsche's board to give the green light for the brand to build its very own Rally Raid Special. And here it is in all its glory. Now, if you're wondering, it's actually based on a Carrera 4 GTS, which means that it has a twin turbocharged 3-litre flat six, putting out 473 brake horsepower. And that engine is mated to an 8-speed PDK automatic gearbox. If you put this thing in launch control, it will accelerate from 0 to 62 miles an hour in a scintillating 3.4 seconds. But it's actually limited to a fairly low 149 miles an hour. And that's because if you went any quicker than that, you would start to tear apart its special off-road tyres. But before you go thinking that this is simply a 911 GTS that's been given the Audi all-road treatment, let me walk you around it and show you just how much effort Porsche has put into making this a capable off-roader. The first thing you'll probably notice up front is this bright red tow hook. There's also one on the back, and hopefully today we're not going to need to use this to pull me out of any sticky situations. And while we're down here, I should probably highlight that you've also got stainless steel underbody protection to stop the front of the car getting peppered with debris. If you also take a peek through here, 911 nerds will notice that there is no central radiator. Instead, Porsche's decided to fit Turbo S radiators, which are mounted at the sides. This not only has improved cooling, but it means that Porsche has been able to fit a smaller, more compact front bumper, which helps the approach angle on this car when you're off-road. You'll also notice that the car is sat on these knobbly Pirelli Scorpion tyres. Now, these were specially developed for the Dakar, and they have a twin carcass which makes them puncture resistant, which is pretty useful when you're off-road. The car also sits 60 millimeters higher than a Carrera GTS, but if that's not high enough for you, Porsche has also fitted a lift kit to each corner of this car. It's essentially based on the front lift kit that you can get on a regular 911 as an option, but they've tweaked it for the rear. And if you push that, it means that in just 9 seconds, you can get an extra 30 millimeters of height up to speeds of 106 miles an hour. As you can imagine, all of this off-road equipment has added quite a bit of weight to the Dakar, so Porsche has set about losing weight in other areas. To do that, Porsche has fitted the bonnet from the GT3. So this is actually carbon fiber, and you can't tell that when it's painted, but you can tell it's from the GT3 because of these distinctive front nostrils. You also get a carbon fiber rear wing, carbon-backed seats from the GT3, and the rear seats have been removed altogether. In their place, you can option in a very cool looking roll cage. There's even a lithium-ion battery in this car to save just that little bit more weight. And all of that adds up to an off-road ready car that's only 10 kilograms heavier than a regular GTS. Now, beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, but I think you have to admit that it looks pretty impressive. And that's before you've even gone mad with the options list. Porsche will sell you everything from a roof rack with integrated spotlights to a full tent that you can actually sleep in. And it's all powered by this little nipple here on the back, which provides 12 volts of power. You can also pick from a range of rally and Dakar inspired paint schemes. Now, Porsche actually reckons that this £18,500 paint job that pays special tribute to the Rothmans winning Dakar cars of the 1980s will be the most popular. But because of current tobacco advertising rules, they've had to write Rough Roads down the side instead of Rothmans. So we'll leave it to you if you think that's a good look or not. Personally, I think I would spec my car in Bahama Yellow, which you can get through Porsche's Paint to Sample scheme. But that's the great thing about the Dakar. There's so many choices that you can really make it your own. Before we go for a thrash, I thought I'd just quickly show you around the interior of the Dakar, and to be honest, it is going to be quite quick because there's not that many changes in here over a regular 911. As I mentioned earlier, you get these carbon-backed seats from the GT3, which are really supportive, and they might not look comfortable. They have quite a big lip to get over when you're first getting into the car, but once you're locked in, they're amazingly comfortable on a long journey, and they support you really well when you're driving spiritedly. You also, if you look behind me, have no rear seats, and you can option in this pretty good looking roll cage. Obviously that serves a safety purpose as well. You also get a nice 911 Dakar plaque over here, this one being 0000 because it's pre-production. But really, when you're sitting in the driver's seat and looking forward, there's not much to tell you that you're actually in a Dakar. In fact, you'll only really notice when you go into the infotainment display and see that there's different drive modes from usual, and we'll get onto that later. So with that in mind, let's go see how this car performs off-road. As I mentioned earlier, this car will accelerate from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.4 seconds when you're on tarmac. But I reckon its off-road pace is even more impressive. If you select Rally Launch Control, this car will accelerate on the dirt to 62 miles an hour in around about 5 seconds. That's only a fraction slower than a standard 911 Carrera on regular tarmac. And it can do that because Rally Launch Control lets the wheels spin about 20% more than regular launch control. And that means when you're on a loose surface, the car digs in and fires off the line. So let's give it a go. I'll select Rally Mode in the center console, or you can do it via the drive mode on the wheel. Hold the brake, hold the accelerator, let off the brake. Oh man, that is really quite quick. I think if anybody has any complaints about this car's off-road performance, they must be professional Dakar racers. Now at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if you're asking, is all of this a little bit silly? But my answer is going to be a little bit more nuanced than a simple yes or no. You see, as performance cars get faster, it's getting harder and harder to tap into their potential on the road and, to be honest, even on track. And it's not like on a track day you can do big third gear power slides. You'll immediately get black flagged. So it's quite refreshing to drive a 911 where its limits are much lower than a standard car. And if you're on a loose surface like this, where on a mix of sand and mud today, you can throw the car around, even if you're not a drift god. You can just pitch it into a corner, put your foot down, and it'll fire sideways. It's incredibly good fun. Now, two things helping me kind of throw the car around today are the two new drive modes. Now, you have off-road, which is exactly what it says on the tin. That puts the car into its default highest ride height setting, and it also splits the power fairly evenly 50-50, 50 to the front, 50 to the rear, and that gives you maximum traction, which is what you would want if you were stuck in a National Trust car park, or perhaps you were going for a spot of muddy green laning. But my favorite mode is Rally. that sends 80% of the power to the rear wheels. And what that means is it doesn't take a lot of accelerator input when you're on a surface like this to get the car to go sideways. Like that. You see what I mean about not having to be a drift god to get the car really sideways? And it's so easy to catch it because really, we're not doing much more here than 50 miles an hour. This car also gets, as standard, unlike a regular GTS, rear wheel steering. Now, that means the car feels very agile at low speed because the rear wheels turn in the opposite direction to the front wheels. But at higher speeds, the rear wheels turn in the same direction as the front wheels, and that means the car feels quite a bit more stable. Now, I appreciate if you spend nearly £200,000, let's say, on your 911 Dakar once you've added a few options, I suspect you probably won't want to take it off-roading like this. But I really do implore you, if you manage to get on the waiting list for one of these and you finally get one, please plan some sort of off-road adventure, or at least take it down your local green lane, because it is ridiculously capable, and it would be a shame if you never used it or even scratched the surface of its potential. But what if you don't have sand dunes or a military base on your back door? Well, I've actually got quite good news. Because the Pirelli Scorpion tyres are primarily designed for off-road, they actually have less grip than the sports tyres you'd get on a normal 911. And that means that the limits of the car are lower on the public road. And it means you can feel it kind of moving around beneath you at more reasonable road speeds. On top of that, the car is also a little bit softer than a regular 911, and that means that when you're going into corners, you can feel it moving around and you can play with the balance of the car a little bit more easily. That's what we love about the Alpine A110. The fact that it's soft allows you to kind of approach its limits, and it makes you feel like you're actually going faster at a lower speed. Now, in terms of refinement, those off-road tyres do drum up a bit more noise than you would get from a regular summer tyre. However, they're no worse than the winter tyres I've experienced on other 911s. I'd also recommend optioning the optional Burmeister stereo because, again, it sounds good and it also helps to drown out a little bit of that tyre noise. And that brings me neatly onto my favourite thing about the Dakar, and that's the fact that it's a sports car that you can use every day. I was lucky enough to be running a Lamborghini Huracan Technica the other month, and I genuinely lost count of the amount of times I ground out the nose on compressions on country roads, and I'm not even talking about dealing with speed bumps. That's just something that you never have to worry about with the Dakar. You can clear basically everything. It really does feel like it was built for Britain's broken roads. In many ways, this 911 reminds me of our favourite Porsche Taycan, the Cross Turismo, because you do give up a little bit of sharpness over the regular car, but the fact that it's just so usable every day just makes it a fantastic all-rounder. Now, I've mentioned a lot of positives about the Dakar, but I might as well give you the worst thing about this car. And I reckon that that's the fact that it costs £50,000 more than a Carrera 4 GTS. That's a lot of money. It's also limited to just 2,500 units, which means you'll have to be pretty lucky to get your hands on one. That said, the guys at Porsche Reading have assured me that there are build slots still available, so act quickly if you want one. Let's just hope that with the next generation of 911, Porsche do a slightly larger allocation of Dakars at a more affordable price point. After all, that's exactly what Porsche did when it created the 911 GT3 Touring after seeing the sales hype around the limited run 911R. To read more about the 911 Dakar, head over to whatcar.com. But before you leave us, to see more reviews like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments below what you think
of the 911 Dakar.